you're sitting there listening to this right now and go like, I'm stuck in this area, no one here understands me, whatever. Here's the thing. You most likely have an internet connection if you're listening to this podcast right now. You most likely have a smartphone in your hands. You can actually curate digital community. There are people in the world that are into the same stuff as you. Here's the thing though, you can't be selfish about it. You talked about having someone who's a ride or die cheerleader for you. Ask yourself the hard question. Are you that for anybody else?
Thank you. Yes. That's so powerful, man. Yeah.
Like, are you that for anybody else? Hey, I'm Colin O'Brady. I'm a 10-time world record holder. I am on Everest Radio today talking about my new book, The 12-Hour Walk, which is a global movement that anyone can participate in, free from your front door, that will change your life in just one day, sharing stories of adventure, walking across Antarctica, and more importantly, flexing the most important muscle that any of us have, the 6 inches between our ears, our mind.
Oh, Colin, I've been thinking long and hard about what I want to talk to you about. But first and foremost, man, I just got to know, like, are you okay? Like, are you good, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm happy. I'm well.
I look at your story, what you've accomplished, and I mean, not only the physical aspect, but the mental, that I feel they both serve each other. And I know that's a big part of what you're here to talk about most with the 12-hour walk, is that the mindset approach. But before we get there, man, please paint the picture for the audience. How did you get to this point? The things that you have done, the limits you have pushed with the human body, the human mind, quite literally hardly that many other people in the world have ever done. So I got to ask why. Why?
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's been iterative. I've been always curious about tapping into the edges of human potential, kind of finding what lives inside of me, and then ultimately, certainly, a long-standing passion, including with my new book, The 12-Hour Walk, to inspire others to step outside their comfort zone, to push those edges, to push those limits, to ultimately to reach as deep a fulfillment as they can in any of our life. I don't really look at myself as being, you can look at my resume, 10 world records, this, that, and the other thing. Oh, you're so different than everyone. I think that, not everyone might want to walk across Antarctica by themselves pulling a 375-pound sled. Look, I don't blame if you don't want to do that. But
that's gnarly, man.
I do think that we all have hopes, dreams, goals, ambitions. I love to ask people this question: what's your Everest? Was my childhood dream was to climb Everest, but it's like I don't care if you don't want to climb mountains, but what proverbial mountains do you want to climb? And not just achievement, right? It could be making millions of dollars. It could be saving millions of lives. It could be entrepreneurship, creativity, music, love, family. Like, there's no right answer to that, but it's your answer. But I think too often we fall short of that. We settle for less than what we're fully capable of. And so my exploration in adventure and expeditions has been my medium to explore those edges and then ultimately be able to apply those across lots of different areas of my life.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, I'm going to have all of Colin's information listed down in the show notes. And, this man has racked up some accolades in terms of world adventures. First human solo across Antarctica.
Yep.
Not just on your own, but like you said, pulling a sled of how much weight?
Yeah, it was 375 pounds. So I was doing something called unsupported, which means no resupplies of food or fuel, and then also unassisted, or also known as human powered. So no kites or dogs, just mano a mano.
You had to bring in everything that you needed.
Yeah,
for that
so when I got dropped off on the edge of the continent, nothing. And that's what had never been done. That had never been completed. People said it was impossible. People have attempted it before me. Someone died attempting it. Someone ran out of food and had to get evacuated. And the reason is because the math equation is tough. Like, if you carried 1,000 pounds of food, which would be enough to get across, you wouldn't be able to move on the first day.
Yeah.
But even at 375 pounds, I literally, it sounds like a lot, but I was eating 7,000 calories a day, but I was burning 10,000. So on day one, I'm on a 3,000 calorie deficit.
Yeah, I don't math good, but I'm pretty sure that's not what you want. Right?
So by the end of 54 days, you can imagine bones sticking out of my hips, ribs, body really banged up and beat up on literally my last bite of food. So very much the edge of what is possible to go that distance, about 1,000 miles.
For anybody to have literally Everest as your goal, but whatever your Everest is, whatever you perceive to be the most difficult, most taxing, most demanding thing that you could think of, you got to have a really solidified why.
Yeah.
What was your why for doing all of this? What is it now today? Has it changed?
Yeah, I think to me it's easiest to take it back to a story of kind of where this kind of originated for me, I think.
Love story time. That's what we're here for.
I mean, it's simple why. It's more like my mother ultimately opened up some possibilities in my mind when I was young, and I think my life would be very different otherwise, but in the face of tragedy. So after college, I wanted to travel the world. I didn't have very much money when I was a kid growing up. And I said, you know what, like I'm going to save money painting houses every single summer. And then I'm going to take a trip after college and like see the world. Cause like my family couldn't afford to do that kind of stuff when I was a kid. And so graduate college, I'm 22 years old, take a few $1,000, get a one-way plane ticket, like the cheapest student fare I could possibly buy. There's a million stopovers and whatever.
Like you got to pay extra for a tray table.
Exactly. I mean, just like this dates the story, makes me sound old, but it was a paper ticket.
Yeah.
So I got a free layover in Fiji trying to get to New Zealand. I actually met my wife there, so that worked out. It was a good way to start the trip.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah. So that was 15 years ago, but. Anyways, amazing trip as a young person, hitchhiking through New Zealand, sleeping on floors in youth hostels, surfing through Australia, being in Southeast Asia, living on a shoestring budget, but having the time of my life, just meeting people, absorbing information, living, right? A lot of people thought I was crazy too, because a lot of my friends were like, I'm getting a real job, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get around to that at some point, but like, I'm going to spend every last penny as a young person trying to just experience life a little bit. Great experience all until I found myself on this small beach in rural Thailand, and a couple guys were jumping a flaming jump rope. And I thought to myself, gee, that looks like fun. I can see where this is going. Turns out not a great
Challenge
idea.
accepted.
Yeah, that's my personality for sure. And unfortunately, it went terribly wrong for me. I tripped on the rope. The rope had excess kerosene on it, splattered my body, lit my entire body on fire to my neck. Survival mode kicked in when I needed it most, and I jumped into the ocean to extinguish the flames, which saved my life, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned, predominantly my legs and feet.
Wow.
And I was in Thailand, but also on an island in the Gulf of Thailand in the middle of nowhere, so no proper medical facilities. I had a moped ride down a dirt path.
The time I'm sure you got to actual medical care was longer than you wanted.
Oh, it was, they couldn't really move me after that. So I went under 8 surgeries in this kind of makeshift hospital scenario on a couple of islands. There's a cat running around my bed and across my chest in the ICU, like just not the place that you want to be.
That's bad, right?
Yeah, that's that's not ideal,
Yeah.
particularly with burns, man, because burns, I mean, the pain is bad, but people get really messed up from infection. And again, I was just in a remote part of the world. Nothing wrong. I mean, actually, the healthcare in Bangkok, once I eventually got there, was quite good, but I was just in a remote, rural part of the world. Scary time, and a burn accident is one of the most painful injuries that you can have, but nothing compared to the emotional pain when the doctor walks in, looks me in the eyes, and he says, I hate to tell you this, but you'll probably never walk again normally. The way that the burns were over my knee joints, ankle joints, ligaments, etc., they thought I would not regain full mobility. And it was just a devastating blow. I think it would be to any person at any phase of their life. But I'm 22. I've been a Division I swimmer, very much in my body, athlete. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, you're never going to be the same. And I just remember this just sinking feeling of just emotional devastation, fear, anxiety, just crippling depression. But thankfully, the heroine of this story is my mother. And she showed up, finally found me in this hospital day 4 or day 5 by the time she could finally track down where I was.
Would. I'm coming for you, baby, across the world.
Yeah, like Mama Bear comes to save the day. I thought you'd have fun out there traveling alone, but when you get in trouble, you call your mom. Probably, I'm 37 now. I probably still make that phone call. So she came, but more than just showing up, she admits now that she was, crying in the hallways, pleading for good news with the doctor, so afraid herself. I mean, she's in this foreign country, language barrier. It's not a great circumstance, obviously, and I'm writhing in pain. But she came into my hospital came into my hospital room every single day without any of that fear, smiling with this air of positivity, saying to me like, hey, Colin, let's dream about the future. And I didn't call it this at the time, but I call it this now, and I call it, and there's a premise of the 12-Hour Walk, my new book, I call it a possible mindset, which is, and I said, define that as an empowered way of thinking that unlocks a life of limitless possibilities.
Yeah, that's the first thing I noticed right here. Right?
Yeah.
The beginning of your work starts off with like literally getting the reader, getting us to drop into the mindset that you had to have to get you where you are now, and is the crux of this new work.
Totally. Yeah. And so she says, let's dream without limits. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Life as I know it. I mean, like, I'm in a bad spot. She's like, forget all of that. Forget about what the doctor said. Forget those limitations. If you could do anything next, what would it be? Close your eyes, visualize it. Just tell me the first thing that pops into your head. So I closed my eyes. She sees me smile a little bit open. She says, what'd you see? And I said, oh, you're going to make fun of me. This is stupid. She goes, no, what'd you see? I said, well, I saw myself crossing the finish line of a triathlon. And she could have very easily said, like, well, I said set a goal, but like the bandages and the legs.
Let's get real, son. Let's get real. Yeah.
But she was like, great. In fact, that's your goal. In fact, Doc, my son's training for a triathlon. Bring him in some weights. I have this photograph of me where I'm lifting 10-pound dumbbells. I'm bandaged from the waist down. The Thai doctor's looking at me like, this stupid ass American kid's gonna knock some sense into this pool.
I don't know who's crazier, him for thinking he can do it, or mom for like fueling this craziness,
Right. And so she pushed me, and long story short, basically fast forward several months I was in that Thai hospital. I was flown home to the United States, still hadn't taken a single step, carried on and off the plane, was in a wheelchair when I got home. My mom taught me, and some, obviously some amazing medical care in terms of physical therapists, et cetera, but I had to learn how to walk again, eventually could jog a little bit. And I've ultimately took a job in Chicago, trying to get on with my life, took a job in finance, and signed up for the Chicago Triathlon. At 18 months after I was burning this fire, signed up for the triathlon, raced a triathlon.
That's quick.
Finished the race, which was, amazing given the diagnosis. But to my complete and utter surprise, I didn't just finish the race, I actually won the entire Chicago Triathlon, placing first of about 5,000 participants on the day.
Yo, bro, holy shit. Holy shit, damn, man.
So anyways, your question was more about why. And that taught me at a young, relatively young age, and I'm in my early 20s when this happened. I didn't get to that finish line and think to myself, well, I guess I'm Colin O'Brady, a superhuman athlete. I'm so awesome. Like, that is not even close to where my head was at. My head went, wow. If my mom had not come there, if my mom had not unlocked this possible mindset within myself, who knows where I'd be? I can tell you for certain I wouldn't be sitting here with 10 world records and the other things that I've done since then with those same burned legs. From this devastating injury, my mom was able to teach me one of life's most powerful lessons, but not a lesson that applies just to me, a lesson that applies globally, which is as humans, and I fundamentally believe this, and this book at its core is about mindset, that all of us humans, we have reservoirs of untapped potential to achieve extraordinary things. Particularly when facing adversity, the ability to shift that mindset, the ability to pivot off of that, the ability to work and build back exists within all of us. We are going to face hard times, but we can grow, we can evolve, and we come back even stronger from that.
It sounds like you just completely summarized the whole meaning behind, Ever Forward and what we're doing here, man. You and I got a lot in common, and to kind of get to a section of your book that really hit home for me, and I really think a lot of people can click with, is in chapter 5. You're talking about, every section is about a limiting belief. This story that we are telling ourselves and or is being told to us, and we're not in that environment internally or externally to think we're capable or even worthy of anything else. I'm broken and will never be the same. At 24, I left the military with my wheelchair strapped to the roof of my car, driving back home after spending 15, 18 months almost, going through a lot of similar things that you did, man. Learning how to walk again twice, being reconstructed from the waist down, just being cut open, put back together, cut open, put back together. In my life, and it's wild, I'm only fully realizing this now. I'm 36, and so I've been out for like 12 years.
Yeah.
But only after looking back at what I went through am I think, really fully kind of processing not only that trauma, but the identity loss. And then to go from that and then to completely choose the opposite, like you, I strapped the wheelchair to the roof of my car, drove from Texas to Virginia. And then the next week I was in school, in college, for exercise science.
Amazing.
I'm literally hobbling around campus with my mom, shout out mom, supporting me to like tour campus, enroll school, do all this stuff. And they're like, what program are you doing? Anatomy, physiology, strength and conditioning. I'm like, yeah.
I'm here for that.
And it's like, how wild is it to first of all think that the complete opposite of your scenario, opposite of your situation, especially you sustained an injury, you got a diagnosis, you're nowhere where you, quote, used to be, maybe as a former athlete or just performer. But when you set that goal of, I'm here and I'm going to be 180, that takes something special beyond a why, I think. So I'm curious, man, when we have that mindset, you know, I'm broken. The doctor says I can't do this. I'm not going to walk again. I'm not going to perform at this level. Besides a strong why, what else did you have to do? What else did you have to implement? How did you get traction? How did you get momentum to keep showing yourself that, all right, cool, it's nice to set a goal, but like I got to learn things differently along the way to stay in pursuit of that goal?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, look, I do want to say that there of course are injuries that no amount of sort of mindset are you're going to fully shift off of, right? I'm sure you've had friends in the military who've lost limbs or, you know, things like that are,
and
you know,
some aren't here today.
Right. And people that I've obviously, and I've lost friends, you know, in accidents as well. And so there is that element of it. There is also that element of, given all those circumstances, you know, your mind can potentially still be sharp, and your mind can potentially still be strong, and you can still adapt and evolve within that context. And
It's like
so,
none of this maybe can, but this can up here.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, the continuation of that, I think that, you know, the universe winks at you a few times throughout your life, and you have the opportunity to just act on that, right? And so, you know, I win this triathlon, and I have started this job, and it's not necessarily the job that I always wanted, but you know, I grew up, like I said, kind of a low-income environment in Portland, Oregon, but I got an opportunity to swim at Yale, and that was not like necessarily like in the cards based on like who I am, but they recruited me to swim there, so much so that when the Yale swim coach called to recruit me, my first question was, Yale, I've heard of that. Where is that? Like, I was like, my mom was like, oh my God.
Yale, just speak up.
Yeah.
You know?
But, you know, great education. But again, an environment where a lot of people are like, I'm doing this job, I'm moving to this, but like an economics degree from there, 2006, 2007, it's like, yo, like go get a finance job. Like that's, you know, so I went and did that in the midst of this triathlon. And all of a sudden, you know, I'm making decent money, amazing money for, you know, a young person in their 20s, whatever, way more money than I'd ever made.
Making money's making money in your 20s.
Exactly, right? And, you know, I got a nice apartment in downtown Chicago doing my thing. I win this triathlon race, and this moment happens. It's so serendipitous. I end up at this barbecue the night that I won the Chicago Triathlon. Just I'd already been on the books. Like, it was just like a friend of, you know, family friend had said, oh, hey, come to this barbecue. Oh, it's the same day. Oh, but after your race, like it's in the evening, whatever.
You'll be ready to eat, no doubt.
Yeah, you'll be hungry. Like, come over. And I end up in that barbecue meeting this guy named Brian Gelber, who's a sort of like very famous trader in Chicago, very successful dude. And I didn't work with him, for him, but he's just like, wait, you did what today? You won the Chicago Triathlon? And like, my daughter told me you were burning this fire. He heard the story, and he was like, what are you going to do about that? And I was like, I don't, you know, and I was like, I started, you know, he was like, no, really, tell me more about you. And I was like, well, I've always dreamed of making the Olympics. I tried really hard in swimming, you know, kind of fell short of that. Wow, this triathlon thing's amazing, you know, whatever. I was like, but like, you know, I didn't actually have the possible mindset in this moment, in this conversation. I was like, I don't know, man, I gotta have a job. Like, I need to, like, you know,
I don't know, man.
Myself.
Leave me alone.
Yeah. And he's like, so you're telling me if you could, you would pursue triathlon full time? And I was like, I mean, sure, like hypothetically, yeah, like great. And he was like, well, how about I come on as your first sponsor? And he goes, look, you're gonna make way less money than you would in your finance career.
Oh shit, wow.
But I'll put enough money out there for you to get some plane tickets, you know, a roof over your head, and be able to train. And I've done one triathlon. Wow. And he's like, so like, let me know, but like, let me know soon, basically. And
check is only good for 48 hours.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically kind of like, it was a little bit of a test. It was sort of like, yo, like, how serious are you about this?
Yeah.
And honestly, I did some soul searching really over the course of a day, and walked in on Monday morning, and I quit my job. And I moved to Australia a few weeks later and became a professional triathlete. And to be clear, that's not the same as Major League Baseball or basketball. I mean, this was like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and sleeping on random people's couches. But it was that wink of like, hey, do you want to follow your dream? Do you want to follow your passion? Are you serious? You've just seen what your body and mind can do. And racing and professional sport at that level, you might make the Olympics. The odds are you aren't, just because that's a very lofty goal no matter who you are. But like, you're going to learn something along the way. And there was just something really intuitive inside of me that was like, yes, I want to do this. And look, the book, The 12-Hour Walk, is really about limiting beliefs. You know, at its core, as you said, each chapter starts out with that. And I break down like the 10 most common limiting beliefs that people tell me all the time. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. What if I fail? I'm not strong enough. You know, what if people criticize me? And when I quit my job, the amount of people, including people who love me, that were like, yo, like, you're doing what? Like,
it makes it very real.
Yeah. You're like, wait, we just bailed you out from getting burnt in this fire, and you finally kind of get your life back on track, and the first thing you do is then like just take another 180.
Do
like
some more crazy shit.
Yeah, like what? Like, what are you talking about? And I was just like, yeah. And even after several years, what's funny is like I didn't have like immediate success in triathlon, and again, I didn't make the Olympics. I did well over time, but I didn't make the Olympics, so I missed that goal. I missed the actual stated explicit goal again. You could put that down as a failure if you want as well. And people would say to me like, yo, man, like, when are you going to get a real job? Like, for real, like, when you use that education, whatever. Now, I'm 37 years old. Now, I've made a lot of money. I've had a lot of success. But in the realm of continuing to follow my heart, I love the Steve Jobs quote from his Stanford graduation address, which says, you can't connect the dots going forward, but you can connect them going backwards. And it's easy now to look back like, oh, this happened, triathlon, professional triathlon, that prepared your body and mind for this. And then you eventually pulled a sled across Antarctica and you had this success and da-da-da-da-da. It's like, but now people look at me and go like, oh man, you did it, congratulations. And I'm like, only after a decade of fighting back against my own limiting beliefs, the limiting beliefs that were being pushed and presented on me. Like, it's not easy. Like, I mean, you know this to even for you, you just told me, right before we started this, like, you had a different job, you're doing this. And finally you said 2019, like, I'm going all in on my podcast. Like, I'm going for this. Like, and that, like, just whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is. But when you go in on your hopes and your dreams and your goals, you're just like, I'm doing this. I'm doing this. And that can be very difficult. And even for me at times, I've struggled with that, but I'm ultimately sitting here very, very proud that I made that decision.
Clearly.
Yeah. So
do you think having made that decision yourself, and when somebody chooses that, when they choose themselves fully, you know what, this outlandish, crazy goal, but it is the most important goal for me, is the one that I'm going after no matter what. Do you think is it only when we make that choice that our perception and interpretation and therefore application of hopefully the lesson learned from failure finally shifts? Or can we really learn from failure along the way without fully committing to ourselves, if that makes sense? Yeah,
it does. I mean, look, there is a whole chapter in this book on failure, and I know we're going to talk about the 12-hour walk and the movement and the call to action from that. But failure is an interesting thing, man, because fear of failure, that's definitely one of the top 3 limiting beliefs that I hear constantly. I have struggled with that myself, plenty in my life. But there's a way to reframe that I actually feel pretty strong about, which I say, like, you either fail or you learn, right? You either win or you learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Excuse me, you either win or you learn. Like, and that's a reframe on failure, right? That's to say, like, okay, like, even I burned myself in this fire. That was a stupid mistake, but I can look back from that with, several years in the hindsight and be like, well, but I learned a ton from that, and I'm stronger because of that. I wouldn't wish that I'm my worst enemy, but like, I can take something from that.
And the only failure truly would have been if you had given up.
Right. Yeah. Correct. And then I also say, in terms of that context, failure plus perseverance equals success. And one of the things I'm fond of saying is winners lose the most. Winners lose the most.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Which is like, it's like, I've been fortunate at this phase of my life to be around a lot of very successful people and all different, however you want to define success. We're super wealthy, famous, whatever. I mean, you can, great at all sorts of things. There's no way to define success. Everyone can define that for themselves. But the one thing that all of those people have in common is that, like, they actually tried shit. And most of them failed at a bunch of things before they got known for the thing they got known for, successful for the thing they got successful for. I love to point out that, Kobe Bryant, before he was Kobe Bryant, was like dribbling a basketball around a court as a little kid, like throwing up bricks. You know what I mean? Like, this is
up
like,
left and right.
But is out there like, I'm gonna play basketball again tomorrow. I'm gonna work on this. I'm gonna work on my craft, and that's true of anything. Stephen King sat down and wrote the first paragraph of his first novel before he had 64 best-selling, books of all time or whatever. Like, it's important to remember that, because it's so easy to be like, oh, well, I didn't get it right the first time, or I failed, or this. Like, take a look at around. Like, anyone you admire, a mentor of yours, maybe stuff, whatever. If you're following someone on Instagram that you've never met, whatever, you're looking at them and you're like, oh, well, they got it. They figured it all out. It's like, yeah. They were grinding and beating on their craft and failing and iterating and pivoting and shifting and evolving. And so, like, were they failing then, or were they just learning?
When we're looking at failure, I think especially after we choose ourselves, I think for all of us, the first thing comes to mind after that is how much money is this going to cost me?
Yeah.
Or I don't have the funding, I don't have the sponsors, I don't have the savings, I don't have the job to support the thing that I want most out of life. And then, you talk about this as one of the biggest limiting beliefs I think most of us struggle with is I don't have enough money.
Yeah.
How do we get around that? How do we start? I want to start first and flip the money mindset on its edge, thinking like, all right, I'll have money when I accomplish my goal. I want to get to like, I don't have a fear around money right now so that I can get to my biggest goal.
Yeah, 100%. So it was important for me personally, but for this exact reason, to write a chapter in this book specifically about money. So when I had the idea for the 12-hour walk, had the idea I want this call to action, and I started feeling like, what are holding people back from living their best life? Polled thousands of people, and you can ask thousands of people one question and get thousands of responses. But I've asked thousands of people the same question: what's holding you back from living your best life? And I got 10 responses from thousands of people. And honestly, 60 or 70% of them were the actual same one answer, which is this question or this answer: I don't have enough money. There's this belief, if I had this much money, if it knocked me over the head, I would genie out of a bottle, be living my best life tomorrow.
I would know what to do with every dime.
Exactly.
Especially in pursuit of my goals. No.
So there's a little bit of a fallacy there, but regardless, that is a limiting belief or holding people back. Oh, that person has it easy because they have money. So I break it down in the book. First, I share a story about my own life, which is I grew up with very little money, very, very, very little money. I tell a story in the beginning of this chapter about, not having, new shoes and kids making fun of me for having, beat up sneakers and, all this kind of stuff that's just kind of insecure kid
Spent
stuff.
years in a double wide, man.
Yeah, you know that feeling.
But grew up in love. I have no regrets.
Totally. And I feel the same way. But that's just like kind of kid stuff that like it imprints on you for sure. But here's the thing. It goes back to that possible mindset. So my wife and I, we got engaged in 2014. We're on a mountaintop in South America. I've been racing down there, triathlon. I wanted to take advantage of the fact that we had been down there, as part of my sponsorship, got on this trip. And so I was like, we're in this beautiful place. Like I want to, ask her to marry me. So we get engaged on this mountaintop, and in this moment of, maybe you could call it like naivete of young love or whatever, but I was like, conjuring sort of this possible mindset from my mom and something I've applied long. And says like, if we could do anything, let's just like dream without limits for a second. Like, again, what would you want to do? We're getting married. We're committing ourselves to each other for our lives. Like, what do you want to do? And so we started this like brainstorm, like staring out the mountains, looking around, and I was like, well, I still want to push my body as an athlete, but I don't know if I'm going to make the Olympics in triathlon. There's other unique ways we can do that. We're both like, oh, we want to have impact at scale. Like, we're both really passionate about young people and kids, et cetera. And we kind of, after this brainstorm, formulated this thing. I was like, I want to do something called the Explorers Grand Slam. So I'd always wanted to climb Everest, but there's this challenge in the expedition space called the Explorers Grand Slam, which is to climb the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents, as well as complete expeditions to both the North Pole and South Pole.
For truly only the most insane people.
And fewer than 50 people in history had ever completed it at this point.
Wow.
And most of them, do it over 10 years, do a big expedition to a Denali or Kilimanjaro or whatever, then come back home, rest, recover, train another one. Yeah, like fit it through life. And I was like, what if I did it nonstop, consecutively, without stopping, and set a world record for the fastest? So I was like, can I do it in 4 months, back to back to back, basically climbing each mountain or going to the North Pole, South Pole, and then immediately getting on a plane and only resting and recovering on the plane until I get to the next trailhead and start climbing again, Everest, etc.
Because we all know how much recovery is possible on a
exactly.
Flight,
And particularly when you have no money and you're like in the 50th row, middle seat, with 7 stopovers, or, getting from one side of the world to the other side of the world. So we dream up this thing. What if we can do this and we can use the media of exposure to do this, to have impact at scale? Start a nonprofit, but really use that to like generate, basically donations and have impact on all these students. We had this whole idea, how can we impact millions of kids and like all this kind of stuff. Like we had this whole brainstorm, whiteboarded out. And the thing is like the next day, or a few days later, we finally return home to where we live in Portland, Oregon at the time where I grew up. And we're in our 1-bedroom apartment. And we have this whiteboard with like these ideas on it.
Love this, man.
And this is where most ideas die, man. Like you have a creative burst or it's exciting. You're like jamming with a potential business partner or just about life, whatever it is. Yeah. Or you're drinking beers with your buddies like on a Saturday night and you're like, yo, we should run that marathon next year, this, that, and the other thing. But you wake up the next morning hungover and you're like, yeah, like, you know, I was just talking.
I was hoping you forget about that.
Yeah, I was just talking shit. Like, like we know that feeling. Because we woke up and we were like, cool, the spreadsheet says this is going to cost $500,000. Like the thing we dreamed up was like ridiculously, egregiously expensive. But instead of going like, cool, we're never going to be able to have that money, we said to ourselves, well, like maybe I don't know. What do we have? What do we have? And
what would it take to make that happen?
Right.
Yeah.
And so really, you know, the breakdown in this chapter in the book is really about this mindset of either abundance or a mindset of scarcity, right? And the mindset of abundance is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It is not a silver bullet of like, you know, oh, you won the lottery and, you know, like whatever. But it is saying like, what's possible within that possible mindset framework? Not tomorrow, am I going to get hit over the head of it? But like, if I dream big enough, can I create that? And if I want to create this, how would I go about doing it? What do I currently have? The book walks through, you know, 4 fundamental steps to get there, and I'll leave those full steps out for people to read it. But more than anything, Jen and I asked ourselves, okay, $500,000. We have $10,000 to our name, full life savings in our late 20s at this point. Like, what can we do with that? What do we have? Okay, we've got Google. We've got the internet. We know like a handful of people.
So right now you're thinking, how can we turn 10 grand into 500,000?
Right. And then asking ourselves, and what do we have? Yeah. Like, what do we have to trade on? Right? Like, what do we have? Let's just be like, let's get it on the table. It might seem like meager. It's like, you know, you get that picture of someone like pulls up a cup pocket. It's like a receipt, you know, 2 pennies.
And a paper clip. Where's MacGyver when you need him? You know?
Exactly. And it was that kind of a deal. But it was like, all right, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And what we circled around on was Jenna said to me, she goes, well, if you're going to do this, we're going to have to get people to sponsor this. And we're going to have to get people to sponsor this. We're going to have to like look legit and serious, right? You're a professional athlete, but you haven't even like climbed mountains before. So like someone's going to be like pretty quickly be like, why do you think you can climb Everest and this? You don't even have like the literal skills necessary to do this, let alone the funding and the backing. And no one knows who you are.
Yeah,
like,
I need
whatever.
receipts, bro. I need receipts.
So we decide to build the coolest website that we can afford. We feel like we have to have one asset, because if we get in a situation where someone could actually write that check, we actually have to look the part. We have to look legit enough.
I got to put you in one place at least.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we decided to put all of our money into a website. And I remember this moment when we signed up the creative agency. We're like, we just signed over all of our money to this creative agency. And Jenna says to me, she's like, okay. I go, well, what happens if this website doesn't turn into any sponsorship? And this is how cool my wife is. She just laughs. She goes, well, at least we'll have a cool website. Basically being like, we're screwed. But like,
I guess we're going in on SEO.
Yeah, know? Exactly. So anyways, we build the website and we start knocking on doors, you know, literally and figuratively, stalking people on LinkedIn, you know, trying to get a meeting with like any random person. Like, oh, I heard this person works as a barista in the Intel lobby at the who might know, like literally, you know, just like any
know a guy who knows a girl kind of
who
thing,
might, you know, thing. And like, what ended up happening? 100 people, 200 people, 500 people. No, not even taking the meeting, slam the door in the face, trying to work on the elevator pitch, whatever. And just like website didn't matter, like just no's.
If they even got to the website.
If they even got there. And so again, still in this moment, we believed in abundance. We're like, this exists. There is the right fit here. We started to like understand it better. Like we want to have this impact. We want to impact these kids. We want there's got to be some way. But it got to be 2 months before I was leaving, and we were several $100,000 short. This like most pretty much hadn't raised. We'd raised a little bit of money, but like nowhere near. And I was in schools telling young kids like, hey, I'm going on this adventure. And Jenna's finally like, hey, like we can only afford for you to go on the first of the 9 expeditions. So at some point
we got to stop lying to the kids.
Like you like you're like, well, am I lying? I'm like, I have every intention of doing it, but like I'm gonna go to the first place and not be able to go to the plane ticket to the next place and have to like face the music.
Yeah.
But still waking up every single day. Gotta find a way. So we get this, a buddy of mine says to me, he goes, hey, you should come to this spin class tomorrow. And I'm like, because I'm a good friend of mine, knew what I was going through. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm a professional athlete. He's like, yeah, like the local LA Fitness. And I was like, bro, like, my ego got the better of me. I was like, I'm a professional athlete. Like, I am not going to the local LA Fitness Sunday group fitness spin class. Like, it's just like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no, just come. And I'm like, okay. So I show up, I walk in the door, and there's this woman. The class hasn't even started yet. It's like woman, mid-50s. She's already like sweating. She's like cranking away on the bike. The class hasn't even started yet. And he goes, Colin, meet Kathy. She was a world record holder. I just thought it would be cool for you to meet a world record holder since you're trying to set a world record. And I'm like, okay, cool, sweet. So I go over to her, shake her hand. She's super nice. And he's like, yeah, she set the world record in the 5K. And she's dismissive. She's like, Angela, like this, I was like 18. Like, this is like, 30, whatever. Like, what do you, but she's like, she's like, no, Colin, tell her about what you're up to. And so I tell her, I just tell her like, oh yeah, I'm trying to do this world record thing and this nonprofit for the kids. I kind of rattled it off. And then she's like, oh, cool, good luck with that. I get on my spin bike. And I'm thinking, what am I doing in this spin
what was
class?
the point of this?
What? Like, oh, great. I mean, that's cool. Like, kind of cool for a second to meet this woman who set a world record. And like, I admire that. But I was like, what am I doing here? Do the spin class. I'm sweaty now. I'm like, okay, I got to go home and just get back in front of my computer and keep grinding.
On top of that, you had to do a spin class. Right. Which is a whole other thing to endure.
So that happens. And we get to the point where I'm walking out the door, and this woman, she calls me back. She goes, Colin, come back here. I've been thinking about what you've been up to. That's super cool. And she goes, my husband loves stuff like this. And she goes, you should talk to him. And I was like, oh, yeah, great. And she waves this guy over. I didn't realize that her husband was in the class. He was at a different spin bike, other side of the room. Waves him over, and he shakes my hand. She's like, what's this all about? He goes, Colin, tell him. So I rattle off again, just like quick 30 seconds. Oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm just in this random spin class. I'm, whatever, doing this thing. The guy's like, that's awesome. I love that. And he goes, are you looking for sponsors? And I'm like, well, in fact, I am.
Funny you should ask.
Funny you should ask. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, because I think the company I work at would like something like this. This is pretty cool. And so I'm like, great. Where do you work? He goes, Nike.
Shut up. No.
He goes, Nike. And I'm like, obviously to me, like probably most kids, like, Michael Jordan effect, whatever, LeBron James, like that's like the iconic sponsor. But I also grew up in Portland, Oregon. Like that's where the headquarters of Nike is. So I'm like, oh, I mean, that's the dream scenario. That's the dream of all dreams. Is
Phil going to be there?
And he's like, yeah, cool. He's like, let me get you a card. Like, do you have a website or something? Can you like email me? And I was like, yeah, I do have a website. In fact,
I do have a website. Yes.
And he's like, great. Hold on, let me get you a card. So he wrestles through his gym bag, pulls the card out, hands it to me. I look down. Mark Parker, CEO, Nike. The CEO of Nike is in a random spin class at an LA Fitness.
What? And then he's like, the company I work for. Like, bro, like you're the company.
He's super low key, nicest guy. We've maintained a friendship. And you can look at that story in two ways. You can look at that story and go like, cool, man, awesome story. You got like super lucky at the end of like whatever. Like that's a pessimistic like viewpoint on that story. The way I choose to look at that story is this. My mom always says this to me. She goes, luck comes to those who are prepared. But the other thing is that I failed, quote unquote, for the first 1,000 times I pitched this idea. But I'll tell you what, consciously and subconsciously, I learned how to give that pitch better. I learned what resonated. So when I didn't even think I was pitching, I literally did not think I was pitching. I certainly didn't think I was pitching the CEO of Nike. It just came out clear, contained, with a dialed message, with the passion that he saw inside of us.
No, like you weren't pitching.
Right.
You were pitching, but you weren't. There was no bias, no agenda. It was just the truth.
Right.
Which is the best.
And so look, was I fortunate? Did that change the fate of everything? Did that, for sure, 100%. But there were 999 meetings that I took before that I could have quit at. But that belief in abundance. So look, the book doesn't break it down and say like, oh, hey, just knocking on people's doors to meet the CEO that's going to change your life. Like that's not this message.
Take every spin class you can. You never know, right?
But the message is, I mean, it's a human message too, which is you never know who you're talking to. So treat people well, so right? True. Don't suck up because this person might be able to help me and be mean to this person because they're, whatever, like not important or something like that. Just be a good person. I mean, there's a basic level of humanity in that. But I don't have enough money. It is a massive roadblock. And I don't think that there's a simple fix to it for anyone. But if you are in a mindset of scarcity, the mindset that says, I don't have this money and I never will ever, 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 so therefore I'm not going to try, then you're right. That is a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the mindset of abundance, it's like, I have no idea how I'm going to reach my goal or my dream, but what do I have right now? Do I have the internet? Do I have somebody like a Jenna in my life? Maybe not. Maybe you're all on your own, whatever. But like, what do you have in this moment? What are you dreaming to do? And what are the incremental processes? And we talked about perseverance before, failure plus perseverance equals success. How can you get there? And so, look, man, I mean, I'll tell all sorts of adventure stories and things like that. But there is a behind the scenes of that there have been people that looked at my story but don't know my whole story and go like, oh, that must be nice. You can just travel around the world and climb these mountains and not have a real job and this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, yeah, after 10 years of, grinding, no one believing in
draining
me,
your life
knocking on doors,
throwing it up against the wall.
It's like,
hopefully it's going to stick.
Exactly. So, that's part of this. And I think that no matter where we all come from, there's different set of circumstances that hold different people back. So I don't pretend that, my story is the same story of everyone, but I do think that mindset shift around scarcity and abundance is a massive one as it relates to money and can make all the difference.
So true, man. That one for me over the last several years has been the one I've worked on the most and the one that has yielded the most reward. It's so funny, when you have these things in your life, whether it's fitness, whether it's your job, whatever, you have a mindset towards it that is allowing you the opportunity to keep choosing it, to fail forward and to hopefully succeed. But it's funny, especially when it comes to money, we don't always apply that. If we just choose a different framework in how we approach one thing and we get success with it, why don't we just choose that framework to the other thing, But money's wild. Money is weird and so much scarcity around it, especially if you don't come from it or especially if you've never had to work for it. Both sides of the coin are really interesting.
Absolutely.
In here, which limiting belief has got Colin O'Brady written all over the most? Which one do you struggle with the most?
Gosh, I mean, all of them at times. And that, the 12-hour walk, the book itself is not a highlight reel of my accomplishments. It's quite the opposite. It's me experiencing every single one of these limiting beliefs through rich storytelling, through edge of your seat, adventure, but also getting through it. But I think that, I think it's a good segue into the origin story around the walk itself, because that's me really in a dark place, is where this idea really kind of came from.
Yeah, take us there.
So when I was walking across Antarctica solo, I didn't think I could walk more than 10 hours. I thought that was like my absolute maximum. When I left, I was like, there's no way I can pull my sled for 10 hours. And after...
Like 10 hours a day.
Like 10 hours a day. Like I was like the maximum. Turns out on the first day, I couldn't pull my 375-pound sled that I started crying. But when you start crying and it's minus 40 degrees outside, the tears, they freeze to your face. And it's a horrible feeling. So I was like, oh, maybe I can't even go 1 hour. This is really
I can't even cry?
Yeah, I can't even cry.
That's been taken from me?
Exactly.
Shit.
So, it was a rough start. But definitely was like, I got through a couple 10-hour days. It was like, there's no way I can go any further. Eventually, my wife let me know about a week or so into it. She was like, yeah, if you don't start going like 12 hours per day, like you're going to be hundreds of miles short. Like you're just not going far enough. You don't have enough food. Like it's not going to work. And so there's a whole other side story about this other guy that I was racing, this whole kind of crazy environment that pushed me to go 12 hours a day. But I basically...
You had a little competition there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That kind of raised the bar a little bit for sure. But I readjusted to these 12-hour days, but not just once. It was like, yo, can you do this 50 more times in a 50-mile-per-hour headwind with minus 70-degree wind chill with you can't have your skin exposed for 30 seconds so that you get frostbite and you're alone in Antarctica? I mean, like day after day after day. And as I said before, I was burning 10,000 calories, eating 7. By the end, I was eating 5. I was a bag of bones. My body was beat up. But what happened in the silence and the stillness of Antarctica is my mind actually got sharper. My mind got stronger. I tapped into these deep flow states of, I don't know, going back through beautiful memories from my life and my childhood, really connecting with purpose and fulfillment, lit up by joy, love, creativity. I mean, I was really like, my body was breaking down.
Emotional fuel sources, really.
Totally.
Wow, man, that's powerful.
and just felt this deep resonance. My first book, The Impossible First, the last chapter of the book, and spoiler alert, I make it to the other side of Antarctica. Most people know that. And become the first to make this crossing. But the last chapter isn't called, I did it, I'm awesome. The last chapter is called Infinite Love, because even the goal at that point, I was proud of the goal, obviously, but it was mostly connected to just this deep, fulfilling place that I found within. And I thought, I could take that back with me forever. And in a lot of ways, of course, I take lessons from that experience, and I will always have those lessons. But I thought that I just found this place, this blissful, clear place in my mind that was like, I'm here. I can always be here. And, the next couple years, went well for me, put out my last book. It was a New York Times bestseller. I'm book touring it. I'm this, I'm that, and the other thing. I set another record by rowing a boat across Drake Passage, the most dangerous stretch of ocean in the world, in a tiny little rowboat.
By land, by sea. What, are you doing SpaceX next?
I hope so, man.
Are you floating across the globe?
And I share all those stories in this book, so if you're interested, you can hear more in the book. But the COVID hits. COVID hits. And my book tour at that time, a few years ago, was canceled. I had an expedition plan with my wife, canceled. And I don't pretend like my book tour being canceled, my expedition being canceled are big problems in the world in the grand scheme of things.
There were problems in your world.
But like my life, as I kind of like things were built that I was building on, boom, and all of a sudden I'm sitting alone in my house, just me, my wife, and my dog, in my family's cabin on the Oregon coast, and just going like, wait, what, just disorienting. And more than anything, maybe the problems in my own personal life were a little bit disappointing, but I'm doom scrolling the news, right? Like we're like, borders are closing, people are dying, your parents are, at risk, your grandparents are at, just like, it was frightening. I think we all remember, March, April of 2020, right? And I felt myself falling into a pretty anxietous, fearful, depressed state of being. At some point, my wife looked over at me and she basically was like, you haven't changed out of your pajamas in like 3 days. You've just been sitting on the couch, like staring at your phone, like being like, and this headline, and did you hear this? And these countries closing down.
I think a lot of us can relate to that period.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was like, you're right. And I finally forced me to think back, when was the last time that I felt in deep alignment with my body, my soul, with that clarity and that connection to purpose, to self, to fulfillment? And I was like, strangely enough, those last couple of weeks in Antarctica, when my body was beat up, but my mind
suffering
was sharp.
Yeah.
And so I said to my wife, I was like, I did those 12-hour days in Antarctica over and over again. I was like, tomorrow I'm going to walk out our front door and go on a 12-hour walk. And she's like, yeah, okay, cool. See you at dinner time, whatever.
That's nice, honey.
Yeah, have fun.
Keep your phone on.
Yeah. So I walk out of the door, 20 minutes in, my phone buzzes in my pocket, and I look down at my phone. My buddy's texting me, and I start texting him back, and I'm like, wait a second. What am I doing? Like, do I need my phone right now? Do I need to be checking in on social media, doing Instagram story about my walk? Like, hold on a second. Like, you don't need your phone. Remember, you didn't have your phone in Antarctica. So I put my phone on airplane mode. And I end up taking the rest of the walk. No music, no podcasts, alone, completely alone in my thoughts. And I tapped back into that clarity by the time I got, I took breaks, I took rest, but I tapped back into that clarity when I got back in. I walk in my front door, my dog jumps up on my lap, my wife looks at me and she goes, you're back. And I said, yeah, I'm back. I told you right around dinner time. She goes, no, you're back. Mm-hmm. Like without barely saying anything, she could just see it in my essence had come back.
Damn.
And, she knows me better than anyone. And I was like, you're right. Like, I feel better than I felt in so long, even before COVID, But I thought, I was like, look, this isn't like a broad, I'm the guy who walked across Antarctica 12 hours a day. Great. I can go on a long walk by myself and it feels good. Like, awesome. Like, cool.
Congratulations, you handled a sidewalk.
Yeah, great. Awesome. But I met, of course, and I knew lots of people in my life during COVID that were also struggling, right? Friends, family members, colleagues, et cetera, who were just like, yo, I'm in a bad place. I'm locked inside my house. I was, I thought I didn't want to go to the office, but honestly, man, I'm like, maybe I was kind of used to being out of the house. Now I'm like doing emails and Zoom calls from my closet, or, whatever, like all the weird stuff that was happening, right? In the community. And I was like, well, I did this thing, man. I did this walk, and I just started suggesting it to different friends, people old, young, fit, not so fit. I said, I don't care how many miles you go. I don't care if you go for 1 mile or 50 miles. I don't care how many breaks you take. Like, just take a day, put your phone on airplane mode, walk out your front door, and commit to 12 hours. Commit to the full day alone in the stillness and silence. And so to somewhat of my surprise, a lot of people started taking me up on it. And Every single
Probably weren't
person,
doing a whole lot of else.
right?
Anything
Exactly.
else at the time.
True. Every single person that came back from this 12-hour walk would call me up and be like, man, I needed that. Oh my God, I haven't felt so connected. I had a woman tell me, I haven't felt so connected to my body and soul since I gave birth 19 years ago.
Wow.
My 77-year-old mother-in-law, her 12-hour walk was her walking one time around her block in her neighborhood, then sitting on her front porch in stillness and silence for an hour, and then walking another time around. My ultra marathon friend literally did 50 miles and was like practically running or something like that.
One-uppers. Damn.
But the thing is I was like, neither one of them are doing this walk better than the other because they're both coming back impacted and changed. The walk meets you right where they're at. So ultimately, the book is about mindset. The book is about overcoming limiting beliefs. And it's told through, you've read parts of it, through rich storytelling, fun, page-turning storytelling from these adventures. But at its core, I say, I'm not the hero of this story. You, the reader, or if you're listening to it on audiobook, you, the listener, are the hero of this story. And at its core, it is a call to action, an invitation to say, hey, you want to have some massive shift in your life? Take one day. Put down your phone. Bring it in your pocket for safety, but put it on airplane mode, walk out your front door, and engage with your own thoughts, your own mind for 12 hours. And I've had thousands of people already sign up. You can sign up. It's completely free on my website, 12hourwalk.com. The only thing that does is basically makes you commit to a date, and I hold you accountable through some emails saying, hey, you said you're going to do it next week. I'll see you out there next Friday. That accountability goes a long way. People all over the world are doing this walk. And just over this weekend, we had people in Vietnam, Cambodia, the Netherlands, Paris. Wow. I mean, my goal was to inspire 10 million people to take this 12-hour walk. We started this conversation talking about whys. That's my next Everest, man. Because why? It's not like I get $1 for every person who does the walk. Like, this is free. This is free for everyone to participate in. I've just built the infrastructure to help support it, written a book, built a website, put an app together that can help track your walk. And so you can have maps while you're in, airplane mode to help you do this walk.
And connected everybody along the way.
And the thing is the why is, I start the book with this Thoreau quote that I love, although it's a very depressing quote, which says, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." And it's often misquoted on the second half, but I love the second half misquote anyway, so I'll share it, which is, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation and die with their song still inside of them." And that's not the world I want to live in, man.
No.
And I have seen so many people now take this walk, and it unlocks something inside of them. It allows them to shift from that limiting belief mindset to a belief of possibilities. Not just by reading the book and taking my word for it. Reading the book helps. It's an aid. It's an essential companion to prep you for the walk. But it's you inside of yourself. Everyone thinks we have to go out in the world and there's sort of this extrinsic thing that you need to go find or capture. The truth of the matter is the answer is inside of you. But there's so much noise, there's so much motion, there's so much, and look, I'm just like this. I use my phone every single day. I love social media. Like, I think that there's a lot of great things about technology. So this is not to say, oh, by the way, after this 12-hour walk, become a monk and go live in the cave for, by yourself for next 365. It's just like, check in with yourself so that you can apply this in this modern world. And it's powerful. It's simple, man. It is simple as can be, but it is such a deep cut. It is so powerful. And like I said, my hope is to inspire 10 million people to take the walk.
It's the funny thing about our Everest, our 12-hour walk. When we hit that threshold, when we summit, when we cross that finish line, there's no one there that's been, I've been waiting for you to give you the solution to your problems. I've been waiting to give you the secret to life, or to show you what you've been doing right and wrong. And then you can come back down from the mountain. You can go back home from your walk and be like, I got it. I mean, I'm sure you know this, but we all have been there in our own way. You hit the top, you cross the threshold, and you're like, damn, I've had this in me all along.
Absolutely.
I was able to do this. I tapped into the emotional wealth, the emotional fuel source that you needed to do something most people will never even attempt in life. But it's not like somebody's waiting for you on the other side of Antarctica going, all right, cool, Colin, here's the secrets to life. Here's the script, here's the manuscript for your best-selling book. No, it's like, shit, I'm here, I got it, and now I can tap back into it when I want.
Yeah, it is within, man, for sure.
Before I kind of get to my last question here. I have one other thing that I've been hearing so much in your story. And I think a lot of us have at least one other person in our life, whether that's a friend, a colleague, a significant other, a spouse, whatever. At least one person that is, whether they fully, wholeheartedly believe in our delusional optimism, or they're just going to support us enough for us to do what we want to do, right? But not everybody is going to believe in what we believe. Not everybody is going to say, you know what? Not everyone's going to get the weights while you're in the hospital bed to aid in that dream to get you out of that bed. What do we do if we don't have that person? How, if at all, can we communicate differently? Like, how do we at least get one cheerleader in our life? Or how do we get better at communicating our delusional optimism so that we're not always alone? Because it's going to be on us to do the work. And the only reward, I think, as at the end of that finish line is what we did to get there and the resiliency that we now have. But damn, is it not nice to have somebody that's going to support us and at least to share that with?
Totally. You know, one of the limiting beliefs from the book and one of the chapters I write is I don't have the right friends, which is really about community, right? Mm-hmm. And what you're talking about. The interesting thing is we don't get to choose our family. Right? We come into this world. I'm blessed that I have an incredible mother and have been, I like what you said, that you grew up in a double wide, but surrounded by love, you know, like I had some amazing, loving parents, ended up a blended family, but even my step parents were hugely positive influences in my life. And I feel blessed for that.
Yeah. Same.
But I recognize that that's not everyone's circumstance. Right. But you do get to curate and cultivate your community. And again, not a get rich quick scheme or a flip of a switch. Like, oh, I flipped the switch and I have the 5 best friends that are so supportive of me, whatever. But I love this idea that's, hang around with 5 millionaires, you'll probably be the 6th. But hang around with 5 criminals, you'll probably be the 6th. You're oftentimes been said by many people beyond me, we're the net product of the 5 or 10 people we spend the most time with. And here's the thing. We live in a digital world now. It used to be like you got to be friends with like your neighbors, people by you. And honestly, that is the best kind of community in my opinion, because I think we actually need that in-person connection. Absolutely. But if you're sitting there listening to this right now and go like, I'm stuck in this area, no one here understands me, whatever. Here's the thing. You most likely have an internet connection if you're listening to this podcast right now. You most likely have a smartphone in your hands. You can actually curate digital community. There are people in the world that are into the same stuff as you. Here's the thing, though. You can't be selfish about it. You talked about having someone who's a ride or die cheerleader for you. Ask yourself the hard question. Are you that for anybody else?
Thank you. Yes. That's so powerful, man. Yeah.
Like, are you that for anybody else? Because if you're just trying to take, that's not a friendship. Yeah. Right? This is a two-way
How are you ever
street.
going to get what you're not giving?
Correct. So I think that's an important component of it. But I'll go the other way because we're talking about the digital community aspect of it. How many people right now in their social media feeds have 10 people that trigger them negatively? Like whatever, that could be this, beautiful fitness model where you're like, oh my God, I'm comparing my body to this person every single time, whatever. It actually like makes you feel bad. Or it's like your friend from college that you followed forever, but like for whatever reason, like
it's a hate follow.
It's like a totally like a hate follow, like for whatever reason. It's like, you are doing, like, that person is actually not doing that to you. You are doing this to yourself. You can pick up your phone right now and unfollow that person. Unfollow them and fill that space in your feed or whatever with somebody who does light you up. And maybe it's like, I have mentors in my life that I've never met that don't even know that I exist. But there are people that, books that have been written 100 years ago who people that, Ernest Shackleton's book. Just like person I admire from history, right? But cultivating your community, yes, in real life, yes, with alive, living humans that you can hang out with is important. But it's also like, what is going into your brain? What are those inputs? You are choosing that. So if you do an audit on that and look around and realize that you're actually poisoning your own brain with any number of inputs, whether that's people you're spending time with or not, it's time to reframe that. And I like what you said too, man. Like, we all think and like, look, I love being in community and I love having, dozens of friends that I feel connected to, whatever. But just like one, that can make all the difference. And it has in my life. I've spoken a lot about my wife and my mother. Like I say to my wife all the time, and people have made this assessment of both of my books. Actually, they're like, love your books, man. they're both ultimately just love letters to your wife. And I was like, if that's what you take home from this, that to me, that's the proudest thing. That's the best compliment you could ever give me.
That's love, man. That's love. That's what it's all about, man.
Yeah. So
that was beautiful. Thank you. So it brings me to my final question. And I think in your works and in your life and in our conversation here today, it's so obvious, but I would love to hear your definition, ever forward, to live a life ever forward. What does that mean to you?
You know, people ask me a lot, Colin, are you afraid of dying? Because of implicitly, you know, what I've been involved with. And I've thought a lot about the answer to that question. And it's resonating for me even in the context of ever forward. What does that mean? And to me, I say, yeah, I'm afraid of dying, man. I don't want to die. But what I'm more afraid of is not living. Meaning I want to keep moving ever forward. And I'll give you a 60-second more answer to this, even though it's the last question, which is I've started to think about life on this scale of 1 to 10. 1 being our lowest low moments, that burn accident, heartbreak, tragedy, whatever. We don't want the ones. And 10s being our highest highs, surfing the perfect wave, falling in love, having amazing sex, getting to the other side of Antarctica, achieving some goal. 10s, like we want the 10s. Who doesn't want like a life full of 10s? But when I think about my 10s, I realize that I didn't get to my 10s. I don't experience them in spite of my 1s, by hedging against the 1s, by pushing against the 1s. I've actually experienced all of those 10s because of my 1s. Because of my 1s.
Goosebumps, man. Shit.
But here's the thing, man. Most of us are so afraid of 1s that we end up living in what I call the zone of comfortable complacency, the zone between 4 and 6, right? You got this job, you don't love it, you don't hate it, you go every day, 5, 5, 5, 5, just 365 5s in a row. Or you're in a relationship, like it's not toxic, it's not abusive, but it's like you're just cohabitating, you're just coexisting, just 5, 5, 5 every single day. I'm not saying you shouldn't have any 5s, but a year, a life made up of 5s, that's not ever forwards. That's stagnation. That's sitting in one place. But you have to be able to risk or feel into some of those 1s. And I bring it back to the 12-hour walk. Yes, you go walk for 12 hours, your feet are going to be a little bit tired. You go shut your phone off, you're going to shut your phone off and be alone in your thoughts. You're probably going to go on some negative loops in there at some time, but you're going to know yourself better. I have never known someone to not take the 12-hour walk and come back closer to the 7, 8, 9 when they get to their doorway. But they also experience a 1, a 2, a 3 along the way.
Yeah.
But these 5 days where you're in stagnation, in the zone of comfortable complacency, not moving ever forward, right? What'd you do last Tuesday? What'd you do a month ago? What'd you do a year ago? How many days go by that you aren't moving ever forward, that you literally do not even know what you did? You take this 12-hour walk, you take the risk, you push yourself outside the comfort zone, and I ask you about it a year from now, 5 years from now, you are going to remember embracing something different, experiencing something different, even if part of that experience was a little bit uncomfortable, towards the edge of the 1, the 2, of the 3. So I tell myself now when I'm experiencing those 1s, it's hard in the moment, but I smile because I go, oh, it's opening the doorway to the 10s. And to me, that's what ever forward means.
Fuck. That was powerful, man. I'm just really taking it all in. I needed that.
Cool, man.
We'll do. Colin, congratulations on this next book, 12-Hour Walk, Invest One Day, Conquer Your Mind, and Unlock Your Best Life. We're going to have this down in the show notes, video notes for everybody. Damn, got me in my feels a little bit, man.
I love it.
Been going through some stuff, but this is what I love about this right here. Connection with people that embody what is possible. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, wrap up this episode here. And where the mind goes, the body will follow. And so often we think we have to have something first before. I'll be happy when. I'll have the right mindset when my body looks the best, when I can accomplish whatever. But it all comes back to this for me, and it's the mindset. We have to make the choice first up here so that the rest trickles down appropriately, and we're able to just like actually keep that promise to ourselves, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.